It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's fire this pig up. It's time. Hope you're excited. I know I sure am excited. So for those of you that watched my last video, we talked about those final steps that we need to do in order to go ahead and get this thing started. So a reminder, here's the list. We're not going to go through it one by one, but basically we're at the point we need to verify our timing and we need to prime the oil. I was going to say pump, but basically prime the entire oil system. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But before we do that, once again, for those that watched the last video, remember when I tried to prime the fuel system and it squirted fuel everywhere? And I put a little hint in my video. But yeah, that spot that I had plumbed, which I was pretty sure was the boost port, was not the boost port. It was in fact the gauge port. So the boost port is right there on the top of the diaphragm, exactly where it should be. So we now have that fixed. So no guarantees the regulator is 100% perfect. You can't guarantee that, but I'm pretty sure that it's better than when I had it plumbed the wrong way. So we'll go ahead and give that a go. One other thing that we talked about last time was my really terrible connection that I had for one of my wires. And I talked about going to add a coupling nut. So that is what that looks like. Probably too close for comfort to the horn relay. So what I need to do is shorten that coupling nut and put a little more space in it. But for right this second, it'll be plumb fine. So we have gas in it. So we should be able to go through our prime cycle, which we'll show here in a second. We should be able to hold pressure on our gauge. So that'll be a pretty exciting next step that has to happen in order for this all to work. So that's where we're gonna go right now. Key on, handheld at a spot where we can see it. All we need to do right now is take our positive cable, touch it to the battery. We should build fuel pressure. Shouldn't be any squirting of fuel from any hose, including this one that we saw last time. And we should see power to our handheld. So let's see if that is in fact what's going to happen here. So here we go. Let's take a look. Did you guys just see that? That's supposed to be a plug fitting. It looked like there was fuel squirting out from the middle of the plug fitting. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried, people. This is some of the craziest stuff I ever saw. I hope I have another plug fitting, because otherwise we're pretty much dead in the water right now. I guess from the fuel side, I can go ahead and still work on priming it and things like that, but what in the heck? Could you even make this up if you tried? You may think that you're looking at like a Holly jet or something like that. This is the actual plug that I thought came with the kit. Could it have? I don't know. It's the same black color. I'm pretty sure it did. And sure enough, there is a big old hole right in the middle of it. What could that even be for? You know, there's times in this video I really, really want to cuss. This is one of them, but that definitely does not do a good job as a plug. Maybe a restrictor, but we don't need a restrictor. We need a plug. So let me look through my little box of fittings that I keep around, and I hope to heck that I have one of these. You know, just when you think that your logical next step should be, screw this, I'm going to start drinking. Believe it or not, I actually did have another plug. And I checked, this one didn't even have a hole in it. So we got to be steps ahead there. So I think we're on like take 3 or 15 or maybe 25 of trying to see if this fuel system can build and hold pressure. So we know the drill. We take the cable, we put it on the battery. We should hear a pumpy thing. It should build pressure. We should see a handheld. Will it actually work this time? Let us see. Here we go. All right, did you just see what I saw? So we went ahead and we built pressure it went ahead and it dropped down to 20-ish, which not sure why that's the case. Looks like it's holding at 20. Maybe it just needs to cycle again. I'll check for leaks. Assuming our handheld came on, although I did not check that specifically. I do see a slight leak. Maybe I have some fittings that need to be tightened up. So at least we did build some fuel pressure. So I'm gonna take a look around, double check and tighten some fittings. But finally, something almost acted like it might work. Are we having fun yet? Oh, absolutely. We're having a ball at this point. Anybody notice how nice and shiny it looks in there? So when I've been trying to prime this pump, it'll like peg the living crap out of the fuel pressure gauge. And so I've been, of course I'm doing it, taking my cable off the battery right when it does that. And so I decided, yeah, it's time to look around a little more. Saw some gas, looked like it was dripping from underneath the pickup. Come to look, and I remembered that, oh yeah, that's what I'm using for my return line. And oh, by the way, I don't think I had it tightened up either. So it's blowing fuel, yeah, inside the pickup here. But, okay, that's fine and dandy. But a bigger problem, I can try tightening this up. What I'm afraid though is that it still doesn't fix my problem. It's almost acting like my return is too small, because at this point I actually have the adjuster all the way out of the fuel pressure regulator. It should be making really low pressure at this point. So that's telling me that there must be some sort of restriction. The only spot I can think of being restriction would be in this return setup. So, son of a gunster. I mean, I have a pretty good size pump. I think it's a Bosch 044. I figured it should be a good enough return for it to work. But it's starting to look like maybe that's not the case. So too, it's using like the original pickup, and maybe it's just too restrictive. So not good. I'm gonna have to dig in a little bit more. Starting to wonder if I actually will get this thing fired up in the amount of time that I wanted to, because I have just a little bit tonight, and then tomorrow I was hoping to have it ready to roll. But let's now dig into this problem. Okay, hear me out for a second. So this is the stock fuel line, which I am trying to use as a return line. So I went ahead and put a rubber hose on it real quick, put it in my same favorite jug there. So what I will do is I'll go back and I'll go ahead and put the cable back on the battery again. If there's no restriction in the feed line up to here, what should happen is I should have a fairly low pressure on my gauge, and I should have unobstructed fuel flow to the jug. So it should be steady pressure then on the gauge. If that's the case, it tells me that there's obstruction there, inside the tank where, that fuel line is connected to. If for some reason my fuel pressure spikes again with this setup, then it's either an obstruction further up the line, or the overall return's too small, or something fun and unusual. So let's see what happens here. What probably happens is that I spike the gauge again. There's enough fuel flow from the hose. It tips over the jug and makes a bigger mess inside the pickup. That's what I think could very well happen here. Oh, I forgot to turn the key on. Let me go do that real quick. All right, contact. Okay, I don't know if you saw what I just saw. The gauge there went to 40 psi. It stayed at 40 psi while it was going through that prime cycle for the fuel injection unit. There is fuel inside my jug. So what that's telling me is the regulator is actually doing its job. It tells me that the return is also good up to the point that it goes into the tank. So the issue that I'm fighting right now is actually internal to the tank. That is fantastic. What easier spot could it be than right inside the tank? So I'll try to blow some air through that thing and see what we can do. Hopefully it's something easy, or hopefully it's something I can make into an easy thing. Well, let's try it out and see what happens. I did blow air through that spot in the tank where the return line goes. I could hear bubbles and things in the tank. I don't know, it didn't sound as free flowing back through there as I hoped it might be. So I think about the only thing we can do is I went ahead and put that fitting back on there, tighten it up good, so that shouldn't be an issue. We know that when it was free flowing into a jug, we were able to be pretty happy at 40 psi. And so let's go ahead and put it through this prime cycle again, and let's see if we can hold some sort of reasonable pressure. In a perfect world, you know, if it free flows at 40 there, then, you know, we shouldn't see an issue with that fitting hooked up. I'm afraid our pump is going to overpower our return and we're going to spike this gauge again, but let's go ahead and take a look and see if that's what happens. Like I said, perfect world, happy face means that we hold somewhere between 40 and 60 psi. Nope, that's not what's happening here. Let's see if we squirted fuel out the top part of this again. Hard to tell if there's any new fuel there or not. So our return setup is not going to work. That sucks. So I don't even know where to go next, to be honest with you. I might take off that sender unit right there and take a look inside and see if there's anything I can do that makes this work. I don't know that I've ever looked really close inside the tank there to see what that pickup area even looks like. You know, is there a potential we can somehow get to the tube and cut it off? If so, you know, I can't use this tank again if I decide to go back to carburetor at some point. You know, do we get to a point we have to, I don't know, cut this return line and just figure out how to plumb it, you know, into the tank? All good questions. Wish I had some good answers, and definitely not a problem I was hoping to solve tonight. So I guess next let's tear in the sender and see what we find. You know, is it too late just to put this worn out 360 back in it? Or maybe put a carburetor in that 460? What do you think? Should we just make this thing all stop? We can't do that now, can we? We're too close. We've come too far just to come this far. But believe you me, it's a little tempting. Voila, level 10 hackery, and I think it might just work. So I went ahead, I was trying to be careful. I used some drill bits. I, you know, dipped them in grease. Went slow, tried to catch any shavings. So I kept going bigger till I was pretty sure that the tube was compromised, and then I took a big pry bar and reached in there and put a little pry right on that tube, the pickup tube inside the tank, and it snapped off. So there should not be any restriction now on this return line. And the next step is I'll connect this back up for who knows how many times now. I'd have to look back at the video to count and try to see if we got better flow on our return, so we get our pressure somewhere that we can manage. So when we had looked and hooked that hose to the line, remember we were about at 40 psi with no adjustment there on the regulator. So hoping we're in that same sort of range. I think we can be happy with that. That means that our regulator can actually do the job it needs to. We don't risk blowing our diaphragm out on our fuel pressure regulator. All sorts of good stuff all around. So This is the win I was looking for. This is the next day from the earlier part of the video. So as I was thinking overnight and things, I needed a win, and this is the way we're going to start the win off. I really hope this is the last pressure test for a startup. Probably won't be, because if we end up, it's at 40-ish or so, I'll probably adjust a little bit higher, because I think this system wants around 58 or so to run. But I just need to check here, and let's see what happens here. Here we go. I'm gonna call that a win. That was just right at 40 psi. It held steady there. So it means that we don't have the obstruction that we had previously on our return line. And that was our big obstacle we ran into last night. So now, I lied. I'm not gonna show it on video, but I'm gonna go ahead and adjust on that regulator a little bit until we're right at that high 58, 60 psi range. And then I'm gonna check that off my startup list, and then we'll go to pulling the distributor, priming the oil pump, the whole oil system, make sure we're getting oil our rockers and everything, and then restabbing our distributor and letting her make all sorts of vroom vroom noises. I had made some timing marks on the balancer, and then the pointer isn't quite right. You can see that line that's in the pointer. That's where top dead center actually was lined up. So you can see a little bit hard, but there's a mark on the balancer. Oh, there it is. There, that should be top dead center. No. Think about how we rotate and everything. That's our full, I think that's 36 degrees of timing there. These two marks, I can't remember what I put them at, like 12 and 14 degrees, I think, before top dead center. So close enough to get us started. What that's telling me is I'll pull this valve cover over here, just make sure, but we should be at top dead center. I'm pretty sure that's how I left it. So we'll take off that air cleaner attachment, and then we'll come back here and we'll loosen that distributor. We'll get it out of the way, and then I'll take a drill and we'll reach down there and hit the oil pump drive, and we're going to start turning that thing, and we'll prime for a bit, and then we'll rotate the engine around, prime it some more, make sure we got oil in all the places that we need it, until we come right back around to top dead center. Then well, not top dead center, our 12-ish degrees before top dead center. We'll restab our distributor, make sure that we have it pointed at number 1, and then we will go ahead and do the thing where we turn a key. Something I'm going to point out, which always drives me absolutely crazy when I watch a lot of these YouTubers and car guys, is what they do with the spark plug wires on the distributor. And inevitably, I'm not gonna shame them too much, but I see a lot of Chevy guys that every now and then try to branch out and try to work on something different. And while it's technically true that any spot in your distributor can be number 1, and as long as you get your firing order right from there, it's all fine and dandy. On a Ford, number 1 is always like in a 1 o'clock position on a clock. So if you were to look at this from the top, 1 o'clock would be here, and that is where your number 1 spark plug wire comes from. So once again, technically, yeah, it can work however you want it to be. But if you want to stay true to what you're working on, how it was from the factory and all that, that's number 1. So that's my tech tip for the day. I took off the passenger side valve cover mainly because that's the easiest one to get to, and things look really good. I primed this engine before, but it's been probably several years at this point, so that's why we're going to go ahead, prime it again. Looking at the oil everywhere. Of course, I put some oil on it when I assembled everything too, but I think it looks really good. We'll go ahead and spin it until we see oil coming up out of these holes that are in the rockers there with the oiling up through the push rods. I probably won't pull the driver's side cover. I know some of you are thinking, yeah, why are you cutting corners now? It primed and oiled up the first time I did it. It shouldn't change now. So this is just a good visual indication that things are working the way we want it to. And one other thing I'll mention, just verification. If I take this, it's very easy for me to push that rocker in. These lifters haven't been oiled up yet, and so I can tell that we're at top dead center here. And so sure enough, I'm pretty sure that I'd left it that way, but it's a good thing to know. And so when we go ahead and rotate this thing over, we'll rotate it in 90-degree increments and stop and prime on it a little bit. And then when we come back to those marks, which like I said, 14, 16 degrees for top dead center, whatever it is, we'll stop there, stab our distributor, line everything up, and then should be ready to roll. This is our setup. No super fancy tools needed. This is one of the great things about working on a Ford, where everything's right up front. In this case, is a 5/16 drive. So basically what we have here is we have a 5/16 socket, we have a 1/4 inch extension, we have an adapter that's 1/4 inch to like 1/4 inch drive. So in order for me to put it into my drill, if you have extension that doesn't lock into your socket, go ahead and throw just a little bit of electrical tape on it, because what you don't want to have happen is get down in there, create a little bit of that oil suction, and you pull your extension up and your socket stays down in there. I'm not saying it's impossible to get back out, but it's better just not to even fight that battle. Electric drill, always going to recommend an electric drill for this. There's a decent amount of load here, and sure, you maybe have your super high powered battery drill that probably maybe will do the job, but let's be honest, this is an area where a corded drill does a lot better job. So we'll go ahead and mock her in there. Make sure that your drill is in counterclockwise, lefty-loosey for those that think in those terms, and that's the direction that the oil pump drive spins, and so it's important to remember that. I don't know if this can be easy to see or not, so I'll go ahead and start priming on this thing a little bit, and we'll start taking a look to see if we have any oil coming up to our valve train. Probably heard that drill pull down. That's a good sign that we're building some pressure and we're pumping some oil. Yeah, got a pretty good load. I don't see any oil yet, but it's got to be coming here shortly. There we go, there's our first one. We're starting to pour oil out. Some of these others are starting to get some oil coming out too. So doing exactly what we should be doing. So I won't bore you with the rest of it, but I'll just keep going. I'd like to make sure I get oil come out every one of these rockers. And then once again, I'll rotate at 90 and do it again for another little bit, and just make sure that as we rotate, cranking everything through to some different positions, just make sure we're in a good spot and we got oil everywhere. So I'm just going to go through the process, and when we pick back up, I'll already have this thing primed. I was just going to use a ratchet or breaker bar to spin this around, but if you look at where the shroud is and the extra depth of that pulley for the blower and all that, I'm not sure I can hardly even get in there. So I do have a remote starter. I don't actually use all that often. In fact, I had to look up the instruction manual just to make sure I remembered how to hook this stupid thing up. And so we'll go ahead and bump the engine over and see how this goes. I hope everything works right. This could be the last thing that really screws me up. If for some reason starter isn't happy, flywheel I don't think had exactly the same number of teeth. It was really, really similar in size. So I hope we don't hit this and have some grinding type action. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this button. Let's kind of pay attention, see if we can get kind of close to 90 degrees here. hopefully everything's good, and we'll go ahead and keep priming. So far, so good. That was a good sound, everybody. I really like that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and keep priming. We'll get her back up to where we need her to be, and boy, we're getting close. We're getting real close. I actually ended up having to undo the radiator shroud to be able to work it backwards, to be able to get my 15/16 socket in there and my breaker bar to be able to rotate the engine so that can we see it? Yeah, kind of see it. So we get our mark lined up here. And so even though it was a pain in the butt, I can't overstate, or maybe I should understate. I can't understate the importance of getting it lined up and really making sure you get your distributor put in the right way, as close to the timing you want right off the bat. It's another thing that sometimes drives me nuts when I see some stuff online, is that I just kind of, well, we'll just get it close, and then they crank on it and crank on it and crank on it, and then they start fiddling with the distributor. And more often than not, when you're going to try to get one started, is you're probably too retarded, you know, not you personally, but the distributor. And so usually it takes more advance. So I think some people will start at top dead center, stab the distributor from there, but always go to whatever you want your base, your advanced timing to be. So in this case, I think the marks were 12, 14 degrees or so before top dead center. Go ahead and stab it there. And then when you put your distributor in and line it up, you want this thing, especially with a flat tappet cam like I have, you need it, want it to fire it up as soon as possible so you can bring it up to RPM, so you can go through the 20-25 minutes of break-in on the cam. It's super important. So don't skip this step like I see a lot of people do, because when I just hear them cranking and cranking and cranking, all I can think about is, oh geez, they're gonna wipe a cam. So don't be that person. Priming is done, distributor's back in. It can be a little bit of a fight as you're trying to get it lined up, is that not only do you have to line with the cam gear, but then also you have your oil pump drive, and so everything just kind of has to fit in the right spot. One of the things you can do too, if you get close and you're engaging your cam gear, but you're not in your oil pump drive, there's two ways to do it. You can take a ratchet and you can reach down in there with your tool you use to prime it, and you can rotate around your oil pump drive until it lines up. You can also use your remote starter and you can bump it in and things like that. Either way works. In this case, I didn't want to bump it in. So remember my diatribe about make sure that number one is in the 1 o'clock position? Yeah, this is where I ended up. I ended up about 3 o'clock. But here's why it doesn't matter. Basically, this distributor, we're using it, this dual points, for this initial startup, and that's it. I wanted to have a known entity that would fire us up, get us through cam break-in and things like that. We're going to a totally different distributor, different ignition for when we go this blower setup. So this is just a one-trick pony. So all we got to do is make sure that it works for this intended purpose, and that's it. It probably gets resold or it goes on a shelf somewhere. So hopefully it is good, like the guy told me several years ago when I bought it. So now we just have to do some of our final checklist things. I think I unplugged a wire that was for the fuel pump, so got to hook it back up to the relay. Got to reconnect my distributor to the coil. There's another wire there that goes to it. I need to look at my handheld and look at the settings, make sure it's using this ignition and not trying to run it through the unit itself. And then, boy, I got to find a seat or something to sit on inside the pickup. That seems like a weird thing to be talking about. It's got to be something that I can be halfway as comfortable on, because once I get this thing fired up and going, it's going to be running here for the next 20 minutes or so. I probably should get a fan set up in front of the radiator. I think I'll grab a fire extinguisher and put it handy outside the door of the pickup, open my garage door so I don't have video proof of me getting asphyxiated or carbon monoxide poisoning. That would be pretty terrible, although maybe it increased my views, I don't know. and just that sort of stuff. Make sure that I got water topped off in the radiator. So I've done a few of these first startups. I'm not going to say I'm an expert by any means. I've done enough I feel comfortable with it. But I will tell you that I'd prefer to have somebody else here. It's really nice to have two people. I know I've helped my dad at different times, or sometimes I'm in the cab and sometimes I'm outside, and just a person that can check for leaks, check to make sure that the radiator fluid is fine and no leaks there. Once again, on the fuel side, if for some reason it doesn't fire right off the crack, somebody can maybe advance the distributor just a little bit. All those sort of little things. So I highly recommend having two people around. And if you have somebody that's really inexperienced, put them in the cab. Tell them once it starts, hold the throttle, the RPM to 2,000, 2,500 RPM. So let me button up these last few things, and we're getting a little bit nervous, but we're also pretty excited. So there's going to be high levels of jubilation or defeat here real short-like. Nothing but the best for me. This is going to be my seat here for the next 20 minutes or so. So that's some nice blocks, but got some nice padding for the old behind, huh? Not too bad. I wouldn't want to drive a couple hundred miles with it, but I think for what we're going to do, it's going to be okay. I have my handheld for the FiTech up here on the windshield, so I'll be able to look at my RPM and start looking at different stuff that matters, coolant temp, AFRs, all that sort of good stuff. We're there. I'm gonna open my door, sit in here, and see what happens. One thing I was fighting is that it's a little bit odd. I think we talked about it in the previous video. Is for just this iteration, when I'm pulling my ignition power, I'm pulling it off that coil, and then it triggers a relay. Well, I noticed that I wasn't getting anything to work. For whatever reason, my voltage going to the coil was low enough that it wasn't actually triggering this relay to allow the 12 volts pass through from the battery. So I've been putting the battery on the battery charger, having it cook a little bit. That seemed to help. And once we get it going, it's not going to be a problem. We have enough voltage for it to continue to trigger. And for our future iteration, we won't have that coil. And when it's not connected to the coil, the voltage coming out of that spot is a true 12 volts. So it really just needs to work just for this iteration. If we get real desperate, we can always run a temporary wire from the battery over to the FiTech and fake a key on. But I think we'll be able to get past it for now. So I'm going to get set up here in the pickup, and let's turn the key and see what happens here. Moment of truth. Like I said, we're a little bit nervous. This is kind of like when you put your vehicle in the dyno and you know it's going to go super high RPM and you just hope it stays together. That's what we're feeling right now. So, everybody, please keep your fingers crossed that this is going to go all right. Here we go. Crawl underneath the pickup. I didn't find any smoking gun, but I did find a few things that maybe were part of it. One of my exhaust pipes coming off the headers there was totally loose, so that can make a decent amount of noise. I do have exhaust run to my muffler, but then nothing past the muffler. But I did have it supported on a jack stand, and sometimes vibration on the jack stand on the concrete floor, sometimes it can make a horrible racket. Once again, at the clutch there, where the clutch fork and the actuator rod, I pulled the spring, it's totally not even touching now. So we'll try again, and hopefully we don't have a bad noise again. It's fired up twice now. for whatever reason my phone had done some weird stuff. I don't know if when I set it down it automatically shuts the video off or what. So I just looked back at some clips and realized I don't have anything of it running. Yeah, almost like a transmission noise, something, but I don't even know how that could be unless is the input shaft bottom out on the crank or something like that. Why? Because it, once everything's in there, free floating and everything, I mean, the transmission shouldn't even be turning. So I think I'll go ahead and get one more clip here, just start it up just real quick so you can hear the noise. You can hear it run too. It sounds pretty sweet. So that part's fantastic. Fires right up. Purrs like a kitten. I mean, it grinds. Something drivetrain related. That's what we got to figure out. But let me get it fired up so you can all hear it just a little bit. And I put my GoPro underneath it, and so hopefully it might be able to help pick up the sound a little better from underneath there. So let's crank her up one more time, but not long enough that we hurt anything. Here we go. Pump's priming, all sorts of goodness. Here it's gonna fire. That's the sound I'm talking about. I'm not gonna run it anymore until I can kind of figure out something, but I figured one more quick little run wouldn't hurt anything. Now that time it almost tried to die while it was running. I hadn't done that before, so I hope that's nothing bad. But anyway, it all sounds like it's right here, so watch the GoPro, see what I can learn from that. But didn't I tell you that it sounds good? Once we get this drivetrain, whatever, figured out, it sounds awesome. So imagine if it sounds this good with no boost, imagine what it sounds like with boost. This can be pretty sweet.